Hello, Maine. I'm Alyson Stover, and I am so excited to be coming to you with Melissa Tilton to discuss the future of occupational therapy in your state. I wish we could be together, and if not together, at least virtually together, but I think we'll be okay through this recording. As I said, I'm Alyson Stover. I am an occupational therapist, and I serve as a director on the board of directors for the American Occupational Therapy Association.
Hi, everybody. Melissa Tilton here. Many of you in Maine call me Missy, so you're still welcome to do that. I am glad to be here with you virtually as well, recording. We're so sorry we can't be there together. I know that this has been a really tough time for everybody, but we're going to make this work. And we're going to have a really good time today talking about really moving Maine forward, moving occupational therapy forward. I've been an occupational therapy assistant. I went to KVCC in Fairfield. Yay for all of you out there. And I graduated about 25 years ago. And my full-time job is working as a multi-site manager, and I teach in an OTA program, and I'm lucky I get to serve with Alyson on AOTA's board of directors. I currently serve as secretary. So we're going to record this, and we're going to try to keep it engaged as much as possible. We have a task for you in a minute, and I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. All right, Alyson, do you think that's working on your end? You see it?
I see it nice on my end.
Okay. So our way to be involved, because Alyson and I we want to hear from you, and there's not a way for us to actively hear from you while you're watching this. So we decided to create a hashtag for everybody. So we created #MaineOTFuture. And we are hoping that throughout this time, whether you're watching this at home, you're watching it with friends or colleagues, or maybe you're having a really fantastic, Zoom party with some peers, is to use this hashtag. You can do it on Twitter, so you can tweet us, Facebook us, or Instagram us. I've made those into verbs for us, and use that. And Alyson and I will try to go back and look at that and be able to respond. But we want you to be engaged. We want you to share ideas, because this is all about the future of occupational therapy and the future of occupational therapy in Maine. And this is how we also need feedback, because that feels good for us as well. All right.
So we think about, where do we start? Because you always need that first place, that jumping off point that tells you where to go. And you need to be able to inform yourself to understand where it is that we need to go. And there's many different ways that we can do this. AOTA has a legislative action center that is robust with information regarding new legislation and regulation and policies surrounding things like reimbursement for occupational therapy services, or the inclusion of occupational therapy as a non-pharmacological intervention for chronic pain management. This type of information is easy, at your fingertips, concrete and concise at the Legislative Action Center on AOTA's website. That's not the only way we can inform ourselves. There's many other ways. Read the newspaper, watch the news in your home area, maybe national news as well. Listen into podcasts, and really time to read the information that's coming out there, both at a community level, a state level, and a federal level.
Absolutely, Alyson. I agree. I think when we think about informing ourselves, it's important to go past just the regular news or just the occupational therapy news. We really need to merge them. Some of you might be really into podcasts. I know that we spend a lot of time in our car if we're still driving to clinics, but if we're also working from home, we're trying to find some normalcy in schedules, and podcasts are a great way. There's a lot of really fantastic podcasts out there, and just sharing a few of them is not the all-inclusive list. Please know that. But there are podcasts around pediatrics. There are podcasts around occupational therapy in seniors. Senior Flourish is what it's called. There are podcasts around occupational therapy in sexual health and sexual well-being. There are ones around sleep, everything you can imagine. Additionally, to stay informed, to really keep that future of Maine, the Future of Occupational Therapy in Maine going, is to think about the things that AOTA provides for us in the sense of podcasts and blogs. So the AOTA Federal Affairs team and State Affair team, there's a great group of them, Heather and Abe and Sharmila and just all of them, Jill and team. They will put together blogs and podcasts about what's going on, or perhaps you're stuck, you want to be involved and you're like, ugh, it's been a long time since I took government class. I don't remember how a bill is made or how to be able to talk to a senator. How do I do that? And you can listen to their blogs and podcasts to be able to take a peek at that.
Yes. And when we think about other ways to become informed, there's many newsletters and other opportunities that either agencies or facilities or even individuals let us know in a more informal fashion what's going on in the world. So when we think about things like state newsletter from the Maine Occupational Therapy Association, or maybe even there's a newsletter that's sent out from your alma mater OT program or OTA program. Perhaps there's a newsletter sent out from OT and OTA programs that are near to you in your community. Also, a lot of legislators have newsletters. So maybe it's interesting to understand, what are the senators in your area focusing on? Or maybe what are the representatives looking for? What are the problems that they're observing, identifying, and hearing about both in their capital presence as well as in their community presence? So be invested in researching, how do I find the newsletters for various facilities and individuals? And then what are they telling me? How do I make sure that I am able to engage and access the blogs and the podcasts that are out there so that I can continue to know what's going on in the world?
Right. So to keep us engaged and to know that you all are there, tweet, Instagram us, Facebook us, whatever it might be, with #Maine OT Future, and tell us, where do you inform yourself? Where do you gather the news that matters for your practice and for your profession? And share a little bit with us. If you have a favorite podcast, maybe share with us through that #Maine OT Future, and also tell us why, so we all know and can add that to our list. Okay. Oh goodness, and look at that, I didn't add the extra part there, everybody. Sorry about that, team. That's what happens, right? We're going on the cuff here.
We're going on the cuff.
So getting involved in the local media.
So the local media is particularly interested in learning about what is new and exciting going on in the community and surrounding areas. We think about all the ways that we try to become informed. We have to think about utilizing those very same resources and avenues to inform others about occupational therapy practice. So maybe you had something really cool happen in your clinical experience yesterday. Or perhaps you have this incredible idea of how maybe an occupational therapy lens could contribute to a solution of a community recognized problem. Local media, when you approach them to discuss topics that are of interest and give them exciting stories to share with others, not only does that promote the value of occupational therapy to the readers and others involved in these local media outlets as observers, but it also gives you the opportunity to have these local media outlets start to recognize you as a subject matter expert. So think about the incredible stories that have happened. Were you the individual that helped a child with autism for the first time be able to participate in an outing with their family? That's exciting. And the autism spectrum disorder is really something that is prominently observed in newscasts all over the country. So think about, what are you doing? What exciting happened in your world today that you could share with those local news media outlets and then eventually share with the rest of your community?
Great. And I want to share two different aspects as well when getting involved and thinking about the future of occupational therapy. So one would be around writing. I think many times, all of us are interested in continuing to grow and try new things. In particular, I spoke to some OTA students recently in John's class up at Kennebec Valley, and we talked about really how do we advance the role of occupational therapy assistants. And this is a great chance to practice your writing. Maybe you have that dream of being published or co-authoring a book or writing a chapter. This is a fantastic way to start to kind of get into the groove of this, to gain your confidence, increase your skills. The other way that I want you to think about how getting involved in the local media will help occupational therapy and moving into that next decade is to think about OT in the news. Alyson and I are both really fortunate to know Karen Jacobs, and I think a lot of you all know Karen as well. And Karen always does something in a class of hers that I attend each year where it's called OT in the news. And what she does is she asks each student every single day, they're assigned for the whole semester, they have to be able to come in and share something that they read in the news or they saw on the television that may not be OT related, but they take that information, they share the story, and then they digest it as a team about how could OT impact that? How could OT have helped with that? Where does that fit into our scope of practice? How could we write back to that news media, the news outlet to say, hey, you missed something here. Occupational therapy professionals could have helped you. And I think this is a really nice way to change up the way that we use news and start to really identify the opportunities that occupational therapy has. Very similar to what Alyson said, that lens that we bring to things. We can pick something out that's different than other people. So I hope that maybe you'll try those couple of things and share what you're thinking about. Don't forget that little hashtag, #MaineOTFuture, about your local media.
And I'd like to share just one more example of this. Previously, about 2.5 years ago, I had submitted a really brief article about childhood obesity and the distinct value that occupational therapy professionals bring to intervening for childhood obesity, both at a preventative way and as well as a direct intervention way. The news media source was my local newspaper, and they remembered that. So when the pandemic came and schools were closed and childhood obesity became a conversation because of the lack of movement children were experiencing during these school closures, I was the first person they thought to call. And so I got to be the subject matter expert on what is the potential consequence or implications of children not being able to participate in that regular structured recess or that regular occurring gym class. And so when you add those pieces in, when you respond to that newspaper article, when you write that letter to that anchorman, it's not just getting your message across then, but it's helping them to recognize that you have messages to share well into the future.
That's great, Alyson. I think that's fantastic. So people keep that connection going. And as Alyson said, that subject matter expert, they're going to come back to you. And then that's going to be a relationship that builds. So be sure to tell us, if you've done some writing, if you've stayed involved and you've contacted your local media or you've filmed a commercial, share with us. We want to hear about that and what you're doing to keep occupational therapy in the forefront of everyone's minds.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about engaging with people online and offline. And as of lately, it seems like engaging with people online has become more and more a part of our everyday experience. Many people are familiar with social media platforms. I'm sure many of you are, and many of you probably even participate in social media platforms. These have really opened the door for us to have the opportunity to engage with various populations and various community members, whether they're in our local community or they're nationally spread out, or they're even helping to make us a more connected part of the global community. So I encourage you to think about, again, choosing those very distinct opportunities in which you are able to elevate occupational therapy as the primary performer in your story. When you are promoting occupational therapy through your social media outlets, what are you saying? And how are you ensuring that the spotlight falls on the distinct value of what we do versus some of the details that might be interesting as well? We also want you to think about the idea that there are many opportunities to engage online that are supported through our national association and through the Maine OT Association. So thinking about becoming a member of the Maine OT Association Facebook page, or participating and engaging in the main OT Association Member Center are great opportunities to have conversations and connect and advance the profession through these online discussions. You can also think about things like Commune OT on the AOTA website, and how you can engage others across the nation in these conversations that can help promote our practice and, again, our distinct value. Special interest sections are another great opportunity for online engagement. But we don't want to stop there, right? So we are still a world that desperately looks for that in-person connection too. Although it's not always as easy right now, it is something that we need to think about. And so what are ways that you can engage offline as well? Are there local groups? Maybe there's a Cub Scout group that you can contribute to how they're building birdhouses. And maybe they can pair up and do that with individuals in a senior citizen skyrise, and then they've got this opportunity for social engagement, as well as some of those advanced skills with building their birdhouse. Maybe you want to think about things like town hall meetings or school board meetings, and what is being said, and how can you participate in those conversations, represent occupational therapy. When there is a problem addressed, it's largely addressed at these very community-based group meetings. And if we're not there to talk about how the occupational therapy lens can be a solution, we're not going to be able to catapult ourselves forward as the innovative profession that we are.
Right, right. And Alyson has identified so many ways, online and offline. And I think, you know, we have this desire to balance for ourselves as well, to make sure that what we're doing feels good. And some other ways that you can really promote occupational therapy offline would be to look at what's going on in your community. So many of you have been involved with different of the diversity, equity, and inclusivity groups. So we have COTAD, which is the Coalition of Occupational Therapy Advocates for Diversity, and then also MDI, which is the Multicultural Diversity and Inclusion Group. These groups are very active in areas of setting you up with a mentor, also looking at things such as accessibility to playgrounds. So think about your town and city, what's going on. Is there a committee for kind of a garden committee refurbishing the town, the city, that looks at playgrounds? That's a place for occupational therapy. We can be part of that garden club, that, you know, small group, and say, okay, here's how we can change that. Here's how we can make sure that all the kiddos can access that playground. Here's how we can make sure that that kid with their aunt is able to come to the playground. There's also things offline that really lend an opportunity to occupational therapy around food insecurity. Here where I live in Massachusetts, they have a program called Healthy Students, Healthy Saugus, and it's all around food insecurity and how do we support the children so that they are healthy. Kind of speaks to Alyson's work with childhood obesity. How do we ensure that they have the food that we need? How can we also advocate and obtain donations and put together things so that we can also support them in a way that feels comfortable and that the person feels like their confidentiality matters? Occupational therapy really has a lens for this, to be able to look at it and think about these things. Also, how we're giving the students the food. Is it in a backpack? Is it in a bag? Think about the work that you all do with LL Bean. You do, I know that many of you have seen your photos and seen you there. You're doing backpack awareness down at LL Bean, which is really cool. Other community things that you all have been part of, I know I've seen pictures of Jessica and Christina and some others. When you're downtown, I believe in Portland, and there is that big warehouse, and you're helping to organize supplies, whether it be health and beauty supplies or medical supplies, you're organizing it. You're making life easier for somebody else. And you're also bringing your occupational therapy lens to that. Think about the ergonomics of going through all of the stuff in the warehouse. How do you pack it? How do you take care of one another? All of these opportunities to give back also consistently talk about occupational therapy and the future of occupational therapy. These are places that we really need to be. The sidewalk community, it sounded really silly when I first heard about a sidewalk committee, and I thought, what on earth is a sidewalk committee? But I'm sure as you've driven around, you see people parked on the sidewalk, you see the curbs are not right, they're cracked, there's tree branches. What a wonderful opportunity for an occupational therapy professional to be able to give back and give our expertise and to say, really, here's some suggestions of how we can make it accessible. Here are suggestions about what a student group could look at it and say, here's our ideas. Here's how you can modify things. Here's how to look at the vision, the slipperiness of it. So I would love to hear from you all, just to kind of put our hashtag in there again. Remember, hashtag MaineOTFuture. Where are you being involved online and offline? What are the channels that you're listening to? What are the groups that you're part of? What groups are you part of so that you can learn more? That's a really important thing right now. I might be comfortable in this, group talking about food insecurity, but my skill set is not in, perhaps looking at accessibility. So I want to join that group so that I can learn and better myself and then share that knowledge with others. So tell us a little bit about how you are being involved and really advocating for the profession of OT, looking at that decade ahead and keeping engaged. Alyson, did I miss anything else on this one?
No, I think that's good. I would say too, just when you're thinking about that pound Maine OT future, let us know, maybe you haven't yet had the opportunity to participate in a community group, but this has really got you thinking about, wow, I think there's something that is really important that occupational therapy could represent to this group. I think there's a really great skill set that we could bring as occupational therapy professionals when the Rotary Club is having a conversation about local businesses and business owners. So tell us, let us know, hashtag MaineOTFuture, and let us know what are groups that maybe you haven't participated with yet. Now this kind of triggers that idea of what could I be doing and who could I be talking to.
Awesome.
Grassroots organizations. All right, so this is one of my personal favorites. The thing I love most about grassroots organizations is once you find ones that really have a connected mission to your own practice and personal passions, they do a lot of the work for you. So grassroots organizations can be anything from like the ones we have listed here, and thinking about things like Autism Speaks, or some of your local organizations that might be raising money for various different opportunities, perhaps even thinking about how to participate in fundraising events and events related to something like the Ronald McDonald House, right? These are all grassroots organizations, and what they do an incredible job with is connecting people with a similar passion and a similar mission and vision, and then they help us to understand what are the talking points that are most useful to get out to the community, who needs to hear these talking points, and where are those events occurring and how can I get there. So the really key root in understanding grassroots organizations is finding the ones in your community that exist and connect with your personal passions and your practical experiences.
And I think one thing that you're involved in right now as you're watching this is the grassroots organization of the Maine Occupational Therapy Association. We sometimes forget that that's a grassroots organization. Even when Alyson and I were preparing for this, I said, oh gosh, Alyson, I'm struggling to think of a grassroots organization. And I was making it a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. Alyson started to name off things. I was like, oh, of course. So think about what you're involved in. If you are involved in Autism Speaks, if you're involved in Maine OT Association, if you're involved in the local AIDS walk, go back to thinking about things that are in your direct community, but also greater than your town. This is the place where we can talk about occupational therapy. If you think about occupational therapy and looking at building associations, there's a lot of grassroots organizations that perhaps are looking at historic areas. So how could you be involved in something like that still looks at the setup of the house? It still looks at, lifelong ability to get in and around, but doesn't take away that historic nature of a building or a community. Some of you might be passionate about that. Some of you might be passionate around things, Lions Club, where they collect glasses. How important is it around vision? So what a great opportunity for occupational therapy to be involved in being able to even teach people about the different modifications to glasses, looking at depth perception, all of those things. You have to kind of think about occupational therapy as a grassroots organization itself. At AOTA, there is a gal named Jill Tighe, Tighe, and Jill's job is, she's the grassroots gal. She primarily works with the PAC, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But Jill is somebody who has a passion for getting things going. And so if you're feeling, you know what, Melissa, Alyson, I'm not sure how to even get started. I'm not sure what this really means. Talk with Jill. Ask her to talk with you about just grassroots and political action. She's so passionate about it. I think you'll see a different side of becoming involved in talking about occupational therapy.
When you think about one of the easiest ways to get occupational therapy recognized and included in policy and legislation, grassroots organizations are the way we do that. When the COVID-19 pandemic came about and governors decided that they were in a position that they needed to create some executive orders for their state's health, safety, and welfare, they went to those grassroots organizations. Like in my home state of Pennsylvania, they went to the Pennsylvania Occupational Therapy Association. The governor's administration said, hey, POTA, what is it that OT can do? And can your practitioners do some of these things to assist some of the other healthcare staff that's feeling overburdened right now? What was really interesting is that when we had those conversations and they said, are occupational therapy professionals able to help individuals do things like get ready for the morning or eat their lunch so that nurses have some freed up time? We said, not only are occupational therapy professionals able to do that, but we're expert at it. When we do it, we train individuals how to become even more independent with their own abilities to do that, right? So we bring a real value by now recognizing what all our scope of practice includes. Additionally, we had a lot of questions surrounding telerehabilitation, and the governor came to our grassroots organizations like the Pennsylvania Occupational Therapy Association, the Pennsylvania Physical Therapy Association, and said, hey, wait, what does telehealth look like for you guys? And why aren't you doing it right now? Is there something I can do to make this so that you can do this and my citizens can have access to these services? And so when you think about how do I move and become involved in that policy piece? How do I make sure that occupational therapy is recognized as a non-pharmacological intervention for pain? How do I make sure that occupational therapy professionals are always included in the IDEA for my state so that students can have access to our services? It's through these grassroots organizations. They are also often the first ones to be called when there's huge Supreme Court cases. So when we had the Andrew case, which was regarding the IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Autism Speaks was invited to write a letter, a memo and brief that said, hey, what should the judge decide? They weren't actually an appellate or an appellee. They weren't a part of the case. They were invited as experts. Well, they came to other professionals and said, hey, we know what a child on the autism spectrum needs, but you actually know how that's implemented as a professional, so help us. And it gave representation for occupational therapy professionals in a Supreme Court ruling. So when you think, I don't know how to get involved in that policy piece, but I want to make sure that occupational therapy is there more than it ever has been before, your grassroots organizations are going to get you there. They're going to be your avenue. So I would like to encourage you all, because Melissa and I love to hear from you, and we desperately wish we could hear from you right now. But so pound Maine OT Future and tell us, is there a grassroots organization that you're currently involved in? And are there potentially some that you've heard about that you think would be a great opportunity for more occupational therapy professionals to become engaged with? Let us know, what are your grassroots organizations? So pound Maine OT Future, tell us about your grassroots.
I love it. All right. So now we've got a topic that's on everyone's mind, right? And Alyson and I are not here to speak to you about politics. We're here to talk with you about the impact of occupational therapy and voting. We want to look at this as an opportunity. Voting in and of itself is an occupation, right? So we know that the value is there. We know it's our civic duty. We know that we're all supposed to go and vote. But what about the people who don't have access, who don't have a ride, who are struggling with maybe some grip and grasp issues? What about people who aren't sure that they can get through the elevator to the elevator? They're not sure they can stand at the poll table that they have. These are all humongous opportunities for us as occupational therapy practitioners. We really have to help people be able to exercise their right. We also have an opportunity around accessibility when it comes to health literacy. So that is something that occupational therapy practitioners look at, talk about. How are we able to digest the information? You know, I know myself, when we voted this week, Ben and I really had to go back and do a lot of homework. What is the information? What does it mean? What is the impact? Needing to be able to talk it through with somebody. How do I put that information into action? How is it impactful for my own health, well-being, livelihood, access to things in my community? And I think just the action and the occupation of voting is really an end result for goals. This is something that you could start working on now for next year for a client. Perhaps they need to do some planning. They really need to start thinking about, if you're in driver rehab and that's your profession, all right, how am I going to help people? That's what they want to do. They want to get to the polling place. What can I do? If somebody needs to, access an absentee ballot, how do we do that? We also wanted to talk a little bit about voting in regards to occupational therapy in our profession. So it's very sad, the very few numbers of people who vote in elections for occupational therapy, so within AOTA or state associations. Alyson in a minute is going to talk about occupational therapy professionals running, which is pretty darn cool. But when we think about people who are running for different positions, so few people vote. And what's really hard is we talk a lot about, how do I get involved? I feel like sometimes it might be a special group and I want to break into that. We have to do that by starting to vote. So I'm going to ask that you really work on that and make that a goal. When you see AOTA elections coming, I think it's end of December or 1st of January, I want you to vote. When you think about running and you're like, I think I want to try that, then run and vote. And that's really just so important, to nominate people as well. Thinking about awards, while you're not voting for the awards at AOTA, there's opportunities within your state association to vote, to give feedback. Look at what you're voting on. If you're voting on awards, talk about what the awards say. Are those awards inclusive of both occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants? This is a way to be involved. I would love to hear what things you did to ensure either you, a family, a client, a friend, were able to be engaged in the occupation of voting. You can use that hashtag #MainOTFuture and tell us a little bit about what you did to ensure that that opportunity and that privilege was taken advantage of.
Yeah, so I have a local legislator that comes and speaks to a health policy class that I teach at Pitt. And every year he says, hey, how often do we vote? And some people say every 4 years, and some people say, oh no, we vote every 2 years. And he says, we vote twice a year every year. There is always a primary and there is always an election, a general election every year. And sometimes your general election is just things like your school board or your county commissioners, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. And so when I think about things like school board and county commissioners and individuals who really could benefit from having the occupational therapy lens that we all possess, we can run for these positions. Think about what would happen when you start to discuss things like, what does the school environment need to look like during a pandemic? And if the president of the school board was an occupational therapy professional. How incredible could that decision or that plan be, having that input? Think about county commissioners. What happens when a county commissioner understands how to look at an entire community or population, determine the need, and then start to think holistically about what a solution to that need would be? That's exactly what occupational therapy professionals are doing each and every day. And so if we can do it as clinicians, if we can do it as academicians, if we can do it as students, we can certainly do it as county commissioners. I have a really great friendship and collaboration with our county coroner, which is an elected position. And he said, you know, I believe that what I learned in death should support life. So if there is an uptick in the number of death by suicide, then that means we have a depression and mental health concern in our community, and we need to find ways to address that. If there's an uptick, deaths by overdose, then we need to start to look at what substance use programs are available to the members of our community and how we can prevent people from using alone. So you really do have an incredible amount of information that you can contribute to these meaningful local and even state, and hey, maybe you could be the first occupational therapy professional president of the United States even, right? That would be awesome. So oftentimes when running for some of the state and federal positions, you can even have support from like the National Association, AOTA and their PAC, which we'll talk about a little bit later, will give support for those occupational therapy professionals who are running for these type of positions. But voting is not just about having your voice heard in that vote period alone, or participating in that one specific vote. Voting is about, maybe I'm the right person for this duty, for this job, and how can I use my special lens to make it a better experience for my community? Yeah, so I think that, you know, I love hashtag us at #MaineOTFuture, and I'd love to hear about the voting experience that you guys have had this past week. But I'd also like to hear about, what do you think you'd want to run for? What could your occupational therapy lens improve in your own community? And remember, voting happens each and every year.
I love how Alyson and I sometimes don't talk about something, but both have the exact same idea. So I love that you said, Alyson, and this is a panel discussion, so we're chatting back and forth, right? I love how you asked them, what would your dream be if you could run for anything? Because that's exactly what I was thinking. I want to hear your wishes, your biggest wish, or if that position isn't created, create it and tell us why you want to run for that position. Awesome. Okay. So thanks for hanging in with us. We know it's tough to watch stuff live or not live from home, but we want to talk a little bit about volunteering. And I think this is something that is near and dear to my heart, Alyson's heart, and I also know, I'm fortunate to know so many of you in Maine in the occupational therapy family, and I know this is important to you. You know, earlier I mentioned, and I really just want to recognize the work that you do at LL Bean each year. One time I was kind of flipping through, I don't know, a magazine sitting around the pool, and they talked about all of the activities around backpack awareness and LL Bean. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like an LL Bean backpack and my Maine friends. Being able to volunteer is something that really, again, spreads the word about what occupational therapy is. So we're talking today about how do we ensure that our roles are here in another decade, a couple of decades. But volunteering for me is also something that has allowed me to get through this pandemic, number one, but has also allowed me to become so passionate about volunteerism. So to kind of speak to the pandemic piece first, you know, I think it's important to recognize that this has been really tough, that people have experienced loss. And when I think about loss in the pandemic, I'm not just talking about the sadness of losing somebody, but also the loss of being able to engage in our occupations, right? So if we think about that impact, that's so important. So if I can volunteer, I can start to kind of, in my brain, this is how I see it, close the holes of that piece of Swiss cheese so it's not Swiss cheese anymore. It fills me back up a little bit. And volunteering really can also help you get past those inabilities to engage in occupations we like because we're socially distancing, we're Zoom fatigued, we're talking on the telephone and texting more and more. So think about volunteering in that sense. But also, and then I'll have Alyson kind of talk about other opportunities, you know, being able to volunteer in Maine was really, for me, how I was able to start my professional path. You know, I went to school at Kennebec Valley, and I had the distinct honor to be able to be taught by Diane Sauter Davis. Diane, if you're there, hi, I miss you. And then Lynn Gitlow, who's now out in New York. And the expectation from them was to volunteer. And I know that John and Julie at KV have that same expectation. But if they had not brought me to a Maine board meeting for occupational therapy, I would have never caught the bug of wanting to be involved. They brought me there. I felt welcomed. I felt like my voice was heard. I felt like I developed friendships that I still have 25 years later. I think about Lisa Clark and Mark and all of you. That's so important. When I was volunteering at KV on their advisory board, that's how I learned about ACOTA. And you all know ACOTA, right? Accreditation Council for Occupational Therapy Education. If I had not been sitting at that table being interviewed about what it's like to be an advisory board member, so a volunteer, I would have never learned that I could volunteer and be part of something to me as incredible as being part of ACOTA. So that opportunity to volunteer, it is a little bit self-serving. It seems weird to say that, but it does fill those holes of the Swiss cheese for me. It fills my bucket back up, and it gives me a chance to meet new people. But volunteering in non-OT stuff also gives us a chance to tell people about our profession and to ensure that we're still around and we're viable and vital in the long run.
The future of our profession looks like what the volunteers who make themselves present in our profession want it to look like. So do you want to have occupational therapy moving forward as no longer just a collaborator, but a leader in the collaboration? Do you love and appreciate the innovation that occupational therapy professionals work with each and every day? Do you think that we have been underheard and undervalued for far too long? Then volunteer, because it's your vision that will shape the vision of what the profession looks like in your state and in the nation when you take those opportunities. Too often, like we just talked about with voting before, we have really low voting turnout when we think about elections within our own associations, both at the state and at the national level. And on top of that, too often we don't even have enough candidates that there's not even an opportunity to select a choice in voting because we only have one candidate that was running for the place at all. And that person sometimes was really talked into that candidate position. So really think about sometimes the most impactful volunteering you can do is volunteering for your profession and making sure that you are helping to shape and determine what do we look like 10 years from now? What do we look like 20 years from now? What do we need to care about? And who needs to hear that loud and clear as often as possible? So within AOTA, we have the VLDC, Volunteer Leadership Development Committee. Am I right on that?
You are spot on.
So the VLDC is a great opportunity where you get to express in a sort of profile type system, what are your interests? What are your strengths? You also get to learn about volunteer opportunities in leadership within the association. What positions are open and need to have individuals running for them? One of the things I love about volunteering also is in my world, my husband and I own a private pediatric clinic in a rural county. The collaboration between our OT and our OTAs, our OTs and our OTAs is incredible. They literally look like a family, sometimes they're siblings, a little bit of squabble, right? But in general, they really show how beautiful and the OT-OTA collaboration can look, and how when that collaboration works well and has representation from both professionals, that you really can create the best outcomes for your clients and the most innovative types of interventions, right? Well, if we don't really make sure that there's recognition and that there is representation of that collaboration in our top leadership positions, then it kind of loses its luster, right? We need to have the representation of all occupational therapy professionals at our highest levels of volunteer leadership at state and national associations. We need to come forward with, what does this voice sound like as a collaboration? What does this profession look like? Because we are all members of it. So one of the ways that volunteering can be really useful is doing it through your state and national associations. And so I would encourage you to look at Maine OT Association and when their next election is coming up, and see if there's a position that really fits you, and then go for it. I'd also encourage you to regularly check into the VLDC site on the AOTA site and see what's open and available. There are sometimes a lot of positions that actually remain open that we don't have any volunteers for. And so think about, can I serve in this role? And if I do, how am I going to propel our entire profession forward in the next 10 years?
Great. Thanks, Alyson. So hashtag us or tweet us or Facebook us or Instagram us with Maine OT Future, and let us know where you currently volunteer, where you have in the past, and where you want to go. So we will flip through here. Oh goodness, Alyson, look what I did again. So we've got a couple more slides for you all. So thank you for hanging in there. I know it's tough to not be able to see and have that back and forth, but we really appreciate you hanging in there with us. One of the biggest areas that I think for me, I'm becoming passionate about, and it very well might be, you know, Ben, whom I live with, but really because I think this is an opportunity for occupational therapy professionals. But I want to remind you about the opportunity to participate in research as an occupational therapy assistant. So once again, I believe it's a professional responsibility, right? So my responsibility is to be involved, to volunteer, to give back, to ask questions. And asking questions is really that basic part of research. Research results in more questions, which results in more questions and more questions. And so many times there's an assumption that OTAs are not able to do research, implement research, contribute to the scientific research. That's the future of occupational therapy. That's where we're going to go. So I want you to think about, what are ways that you can incorporate this into your everyday life? So whether it be through OT, OTA collaboration and supervision, that's one way. That's something you're doing, right? Because we're all doing it. So you're already doing it. You're already there. Take an article, digest it together, utilize some of the interventions, put them into place, come back, talk about it. It didn't really work. Let's re-look at it. Let's go back, tweak it. So you're really following that infographic there in your top left. Another way for OTAs to really participate in this is to kind of do the research. And that's something that's completely within our scope of practice. A lot of times we might feel that we're stuck with money. We know it's hard. We know that time is short. You might be thinking that through this entire presentation. Well, Alyson and Melissa, when do you expect us to work? But you're doing the work already. You're utilizing evidence-based practice. So you're already doing it. Let's start contributing to it. Let's start collecting the things that we're doing and seeing the results that are happening when we work, with Miss Singh, and how does that impact her, and how can I take that information and then take it over to Mr. Jones? So that's kind of the basic of utilizing research, and we could talk about it for days and days and days. But I want Alyson to have a chance to talk really about kind of hospitals and the other ways that we can get involved.
Yeah, so research is usually happening all the time and all around us. And they're often seeking out individuals to participate in that research. we don't have to participate in research that calls specifically for an occupational therapy professional, right? We can look at the research that's occurring and again, ask how can we participate? How can we maybe represent occupational therapy practice through being an interventionist in a regular healthcare or hospital-related research program or project? How can we look into what schools are doing? And that's looking at things like, yes, what are the OT and OTA programs that we are collaborating with and engaged with? What are they doing and how can we get involved in their research? But it also means looking at other schools around you and what research are they participating in? Quality improvement is something that's almost required of us in our job settings, but it's also a type of action research. And so if we're doing it already, why not collect the data and inform everybody about how we were able to improve the quality of a project or a program? So I encourage you to really investigate what is the research that's occurring around me, even if it's not requesting an occupational therapy professional specifically, how can I become involved?
Absolutely. So hashtag us, pound Maine OT Future. Tell us your research wishes again. What are the things that I want to do research on? What do I want to learn more about? Hopefully, as you follow the hashtag, you can find people who have a match, and there you go. Maybe it's a mentorship and a partnership, and we see a paper and a poster in your future. So share with us what you're working on and also what you think needs to be worked on. Okay. So last but not least, something that is so very important to us and also so very important to Alyson. I do just want to kind of give Alyson a little bit of a kudo for a moment. As Alyson, you might have seen in the awards that came out, we saw that Jessica Balduc, your state president, is getting her fellow. So congrats, Jess. And there's probably some more people on Maine, and I hope I didn't miss you. But also Alyson, in her regards to all of her work around policy and legislation and being involved in making changes, is receiving the Lindy Boggs Award, which is a really huge accolades for her and a really big award. So we're proud of you, Alyson, and I'll let you kick this section off.
Sure. So we talked a lot about all these various ways that you can become involved. And then Melissa talked a little bit too about the idea that we all do still have to work, right? And there are various other responsibilities that we have through our life. We are occupational therapy professionals, and so occupational balance should be a goal we have not just for our clients, but for ourselves. And so I find that being involved with my professional associations, particularly my state association, as well as the National Association, AOTA, as well as some state associations that are very near and dear to me. I live very close to the Pennsylvania-Ohio border. I like to participate in as an Ohio Occupational Therapy Association member, as well as Pennsylvania Occupational Therapy Association member. Being involved in your professional associations is the avenue to every one of these steps. How do I know what to volunteer for or get involved in leadership? You know it through your professional associations. How do I take that first step into making a difference in voting or running for a specific office that I can make some changes in? Your professional association is going to do that. How do I know that what I'm saying is accurate or even reasonable, or that there's any evidence behind that? Your professional associations are going to do that. There's going to be committees that you can become involved in, small steps, larger steps, leading you to bigger changes in an easier and supported way. You don't have to know it all. You don't even have to have the confidence. You just have to know how to connect with the right type of resources to give you the knowledge and the confidence. Your professional associations will do that. Most of my legislative work that I've been able to do, like writing some of the executive orders for the pandemic in the state of Pennsylvania, occurred through my state association. A lot of the legislation involvement that I've had in being able to ascertain different House of Representative members to sponsor legislation that is occupational therapy friendly happened through AOTA's Hill Day and efforts that I was given. I didn't know how to set up the meeting. Jill did. She did it for me. She gave me some incredible talking points. She outlined in very reasonable language what the legislation words were. And then she gave me a pep talk and said, get in there, you can do this. And by the end of the day, Mike Doyle said, of course I'll co-sponsor the bill, the Home Health Flexibility Act, right? So you can make these changes, but you don't have to do it on your own. You can do it with incredible support. Our PACs, or our political action committees, are also the resources for this. If I want to think about who's my go-to to tell me what's going on in my state or at the national level, what type of information should I think about asking myself when I'm exploring a candidate during voting or election season, my PAC is going to give me that information. Again, they're going to give me that support. They're going to move me into places where I don't have to investigate on my own. So you have a skill set, right? Every occupational therapy professional has what I believe is a superpower. Our lens feels very natural to us, but it is so foreign to the rest of the world and so valuable to each and every person that we're kind of like superheroes. So you have this incredible natural lens that has tremendous power to it. But sometimes finding all the ways to apply that lens where it's going to make incredible impact is hard to do. So connect with your professional associations, be a member of your state association, be a member of AOTA, be a contributor to the PAC, read their newsletters, let them support you so that all you have to do is use your superpower.
I agree, Alyson. I think being part of, to me, it's a family. It's my secondary family. It's my secondary home. It's the people that I can lean on. If I am not sure about what's going on in pediatrics, I can phone a friend. I can phone a friend that I've met through, being a member of Maine OT Association and then here in Massachusetts as well. It's your opportunity to ensure that we are here in 10 years. It's vital and it keeps us viable and part of the process and a part of the solution for whatever's going on in the world. So I really hope that you'll consider keeping your membership, or if you haven't signed up today, go online. I'm sure that Maine OT Association has it very easy on their website. Download that paperwork, sign up, be a member, look at things. AOTA membership has a monthly process that you can do. I'm on the monthly plan. I love it. I don't even have to worry about it. Comes right out of my account, and it makes life easier. But I think there's such a wealth of resources and opportunities, but it really is ensuring that our future is here. So use our hashtag #MaineOTFuture and tell us why you are part of your professional association or why you donate to your political action committee. We want to hear. So you have survived being with us. I think we've done pretty darn well on time. We might be a few minutes over, but not bad for not being able to see clocks or see people. Alice and I are really people. We really need people, and we really do love to connect. We would love to have another resource in our pocket. We would love to be a resource to you. So feel free to reach out to us via email, find us on Twitter. We did give you our Twitter names. I don't know the correct word for that, but that is all there for you. And I really do appreciate you being here. I'm so sorry that we couldn't go and see you all. I haven't been in Maine, I think, in a year due to the pandemic. So if anyone's in the Augusta area, stop by my mom and dad's house, tell them I said hi, swing on over to Norwalk, say hi to Ben's family for him. But we really do miss you, and I hope that you all are doing well and you're taking care of yourselves. You're eating and you're drinking and you're doing fun stuff that fulfill you and fill your bucket back up.
Yes, thank you so much. It is always an honor to get to chat with Melissa, and then get to chat with all of you with Melissa. And so we thank you. It's been incredible to share our passions with you because we know that that's something that really unites us as an occupational therapy family is our passion. And so it was fun to share it with you. I am super excited to read your hashtags, sounds, all of your great information. I hope that we can learn from one another from this sharing, and that we can just continue to catapult occupational therapy into the forefront picture that we know it needs to be.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.